A top story in town today, the Israel-Hamas war continues. I frequently feel like I say this, but things do seem to be getting worse by the day, so it seems. There do seem to be, though, the calls for ceasefire getting loudly called by various different parties now as being the next step that is required. I have to say that view does divide opinion. I shall throw it to my panel first and foremost. Peter Hitchens, on this situation about whether or not the ceasefire now, calls for ceasefire, is the next right step, is it?
Well, I don't think Israel should ever have launched a bombardment of Gaza. I think it's one of the biggest mistakes they've ever made. It's completely drawn attention away from the origin of this whole event, the horrible pogrom on October the 7th, when Hamas burst into Israel and slaughtered innocent people. I don't know why they did it. It's completely counterproductive. It won't destroy Hamas. It will inevitably, as always happens when you bomb populated cities, it will kill innocent people, and it won't do any military good either. So I'm baffled as to why they ever started, and if they would only stop it, it can't but be a good thing. And I speak as probably the most militantly pro-Israel person you're likely to meet in a month of Sundays. So I just cannot see why they don't stop it.
Well, I've got a lot to say in response to that, but before I do, Matt, your thoughts on, firstly, what Peter just said.
I mean, I don't always agree with Peter. We've certainly clashed on social media in the past. I've interviewed him lots of times. But I think on this, he's talking good sense. And I'll tell you why I think he's talking good sense. Because I think it was obviously Hamas's aim to lure Israel into killing civilians and potentially actually to go in this ground offensive as well. Heaven knows how many Israeli soldiers will lose their lives if they were to do that. We know that thousands of Palestinians, many of them civilians, have already lost their lives as a consequence of the Israeli bombing. And I'm not sure, even if they were successful in destroying the Hamas military leadership, whether actually in the long run this isn't going to create significantly more hate, if that's possible, within Gaza. And one further thing to say about this, and this is not to denigrate for a single second from the medieval barbarism that we witnessed in Israel on October the 7th. It was,
and I have to say, you're Jewish
unspeakable.
Well.
I'm Jewish. My grandparents were forced out of their houses in Vienna, from their apartments in Vienna in the 1930s by Hitler. So clearly, not just as a human being, but as a Jew, I have enormous empathy for the horrors that we have witnessed in Israel. But remember that the political leadership of Hamas, at least some of them, are cosily sitting in Qatar. So Israel isn't able to reach them. I'm not sure that by bombing Gaza into smithereens, Israel is actually working in its own national self-interest.
You see, I want to invite you guys in at home at this point, because I know my audience well enough. I speak to you guys every day, and I can almost hear you shouting from your sofa. Many people will be shouting that they felt that, you know, every single person in the land with a brain cell would conclude and concede that actually what Hamas did, I agree with you, they're barbaric. It is horrendous what happened on October the 7th. It's almost beyond comprehension what they did. But because they did that, there'll be many of my audience that say it is, of course, regrettable that the acts have to be taken in response. But you can't just, what do? Just sit there and go, you know what? You've come in on your paragliders, you burst through your fences, you've grabbed people in their homes, you've grabbed people off festivals. You know what? Hey, just don't worry about it. They've got to do something.
There's no logic in what you say. By bombing Gaza, do you think you're going to do anything to the Hamas leadership or the Hamas military organisation? They're deep underground. They have their own electricity supplies, their own generators.
So you do nothing then?
They have their own water supplies. They have their own food. They will not suffer in the slightest from this. The people who will suffer will be the ordinary people of Gaza. I've been to Gaza. There are an awful lot of people there who are constantly terrified by the bombardments which come on their homes because Hamas has provoked them. Hamas provoked this attack. They wanted the Israelis to respond in this way, and they're delighted that they have done. Napoleon Bonaparte gave a very good piece of advice more than 200 years ago to people who are engaging in war: never interrupt your enemy while he is making a mistake. What Hamas did was a terrible mistake because they revealed the true face of a huge amount of the anti-Israel movement to a world which has got used to believing very much in the anti-Israel propaganda, which is very common. common. They actually showed that what this is actually about is people who hate Israel and will always hate Israel, and until the world stops giving them aid and comfort, they'll carry on not just hating Israel, but attacking it. That was revealed in a way which had not been seen before on October the 7th. Thanks to Israel's bombardment of Gaza, it's now slipped out of the news. All we talk about is the bombardment of Gaza. They've missed a huge opportunity to make their case. And also, what is the military or political point of this? Israel's survival does not depend on its ability to bomb blocks of flats in Gaza. It depends ultimately on the support, particularly of the United States, but the rest of the Western world. If it loses the support, the political support of the populations of the Western world, then it hasn't got long to survive.
Again, I think a lot of what Peter says is almost unimpeachable. I think he's wrong on one thing, and that is that Israel claims already, and I think it claimed quite early on in its bombardment, to have killed at least one, possibly more, of the architects of the savage acts that we saw carried out in Israel. So it's not that Hamas have completely got off scot-free. What I would say is that Israel has been very successful, if that's the right word, in assassinating members of Hamas over the years. And I think if it had taken a pause rather than rushed in the predictable way in which it has. And this has happened before because Hamas have committed atrocities in Israel before, and Israel has responded, in my view, heavy-handedly before. If it had paused and reflected and enjoyed, if that's the right word, a degree of global support for it in its moment of crisis, I think if we're talking about PR battles, PR wars, it would be doing much better than it has at the moment.
But again, I mean, I have to put this to you because I can hear my viewers and they will be saying everybody is familiar with what happened on October 7th. It was so barbaric, and it's easy for us to sit in a cozy TV studio and go, I agree. They could have sat and they could have waited, they could have reflected.
I agree, and that's why Joe Biden, President of the United States, went over there, showed solidarity with Israel, but urged caution on the basis in part of mistakes that America has made before. You remember 9/11, how can any of us forget it? The world stood, or much of the world, the civilized world, stood with America after those attacks. But then what did we see? We saw Afghanistan, which turned into a 20-year nightmare, and we saw the Iraq War, which was a catastrophe by the West and lost countless civilians their lives. And it hasn't made the world a better place. And if Israel is going to make the same mistakes that we have, then in the end, Israel suffers as well.
Doing nothing is so often better than doing something stupid.
Well,
there's always this cry, so Hamas has attacked us, something must be done. Well, one thing that must be done is to strengthen the defences of Israel along that border very quickly and very firmly, and anywhere else where that might happen. And people need to be accountable for that. And one of the reasons why Israel's politicians, who frankly are not particularly, with a few exceptions, particularly impressive, instead of doing something thoughtful, wanted to placate the undoubted rage of their population against the vulnerability which had been exposed. One easy way of doing that was to bomb Gaza. But it was easy. It didn't mean it was right. It didn't mean it was effective. So it is neither right nor is it effective. Bombing populated areas means you will kill innocent people. You may not intend to do so, but you will do so. So it will be laid to your account.
You say that you know the GB audience well. I would suggest that actually there's a diversity of opinions of people who watch GB News. But sure, I agree with you. Lots of people will be looking at what Peter has said, looking at what I have said, and be aghast. And what I say,
well, they're asking you a simple question. A lot of my viewers are getting in touch and asking me to ask you to a simple question. Okay. They're listening to what you're saying tonight, and they're asking, well, ask your panel, Michelle, what do you think Israel should have done then?
I think Israel should have paused, as I've said. I think it would have got continued to get an enormous amount of global sympathy as it paused. And it should probably have gone after the leadership of Hamas, as it has been over the years, and assassinated them. And what Netanyahu, who is this far-right Prime Minister of Israel, actually said in 2019 is he wanted to sustain Hamas. By keeping Hamas in place in Gaza, that was his barrier against a two-state solution. So Israel's leadership, it doesn't have any responsibility, I don't believe, for the savage acts, as I say, of medieval barbarism carried out by those Hamas evildoers. Of course it doesn't. But he has mismanaged this situation. And let's not forget that Israel's defences and its security apparatus and its spy chiefs failed in the most miserable way by not foreseeing those atrocities.
So if you are Jewish, if it was one of your family members that had been grabbed from their house or grabbed from this festival or whatever, so now they've got your family member, your family member is one of these hostages, would you have been comfortable then? So you're getting in touch with the power that be, where's my mum, where's my grandma, where's my relative? You know what, we're just going to pause and think.
I have friends who live in Israel. And one of the things that I did in the immediate aftermath of these attacks is get in touch with my Jewish friends in London to show solidarity. And I am deeply concerned by the rise in anti-Semitism in this country. There is no excuse for it. But my response to seeing children butchered by Hamas terrorists is not to celebrate or seek to justify the killing of lots of children in Palestine. I have a 1-year-old, you have a child, lots of the GBNews viewers have children, Peter has children. When I see a dead child, I think of my own child, and I'm not interested whether that child is an Israeli or a Palestinian.